right, welcome to Johnson County Community College. My name is Michelle Riley, and I am a registered dietitian and professor in the Department of Hospitality, and we're really glad to have you. First, I'm going to introduce Dr. Deborah Sullivan, who's the chair of dietetics and nutrition at the University of Kansas Medical Center.
Okay, and thank you, Michelle, and it's my pleasure to welcome you guys as well. And as you may have noticed, this is a joint program that's jointly offered by Johnson County Community College, the University of Kansas Medical Center, and the University of Kansas Health System. And we're very excited that the three of us have been working together to bring these sessions. So our topic tonight is whole grains. And our first speaker today is Dr. Holly Hull. And Dr. Hull is an associate professor in the Department of Dietetics and Nutrition at the University of Kansas Medical Center. And it's a treat to have Dr. Hull come and talk to us tonight because since the topic is whole grains, her area of research is about fiber in whole grains. So we'll have Dr. Hull present.
Hello. And I am excited to be here this evening to talk to you guys. As Deb said, I'm an associate professor in the Department of Dietetics and Nutrition, and I primarily work with pregnant women and their babies in my research studies. So, like Deb said, I'm going to be talking about fiber, which is one of the fabulous nutrients that we find with whole grains. And when I'm using fiber in my studies, I'm looking to understand how the prenatal diet during pregnancy affects the mom's health during pregnancy, as well as her risk of developing diseases after pregnancy. And then I'm also interested in studying how mom's diet during pregnancy affects the growth of her baby, and then the risk for the baby to develop diseases later in life. We are coming to understand that what mom eats during pregnancy is really important for the health of mom, of course, but also in terms of what we call fetal programming or developmental origins of disease for her offspring. And so in particular, I'm interested in looking to understand what is the best way to promote a healthy diet in pregnancy while also promoting appropriate weight gain during pregnancy. Something that we've noticed over the last several years is that women are gaining too much weight during pregnancy. And so my interventions have focused on how can we design a simple intervention. Moms have given us feedback. Pregnancy is a difficult time. Lots of things are changing. They're preparing for the baby to come, or they might be preparing to add to their family, and so they need a simple intervention. In fact, in one of the interventions we did, the mom said, "Give me one goal. That's all I got. I've got energy to focus on one goal." So I started to look at the different nutrients and thought, what is the one nutrient I can focus on in my research to have the largest impact? And what I came up with is fiber. And so we'll talk a little bit about the health effects of fiber and why I focused in on that as a nutrient. So I put together this diagram to outline three of the benefits we see, the biggest benefits especially related to dietary fiber intake. And since I'm focusing on, we want to prevent excessive weight gain during pregnancy is incredibly important for appropriate growth of the baby. So we don't want them to lose weight during pregnancy. We just want to blunt the amount of weight that they gain to make sure it's in the appropriate range. We want to prevent excessive. So recently, there have been new definitions of how fiber is characterized. Probably you've heard soluble, insoluble, but we're kind of moving away from that, and now we're focusing on two other terms, viscosity and fermentability. And those terms are somewhat similar. Viscosity, in terms of how we used to define fiber, viscosity speaks to how the gel formation with nutrients or with when food is digested. And what that means is as your food's digested, if you have fibers that are viscous, they collect water, form a gel-like substance, and it slows down the process of digestion. And that's awesome because it gives the body time to respond to that food entering into the digestive tract to signal satiety and to maximize digestion and absorption. Also blunts our glucose and insulin responses and handles our lipids appropriately. All great things. check 1 for score fiber. 2, the fermentability. You might be like, what the heck is that? I get that a lot, but I bet you guys have heard at some point, sometime in the news media, the microbiome. They call it the gut, the bugs living in our guts. We are increasingly becoming aware that the bacteria that reside in our GI tract are incredibly important for our health. And wouldn't you know it, fiber is a fantastic food to promote the growth of those good bacteria. We call that a prebiotic. Sometimes you might hear that term on media or in the grocery store. So fiber is a prebiotic because it provides food for the growth of the good bacteria in the gut. You can see that in the other column. And so when we eat a diet high in fiber, it promotes the growth of those good bacteria, and they signal increased short-chain fatty acids, which send out fantastic signals to do good things in the body. One is promote satiety, and what that is it means it tells us we're full. So it sends signals to the brain and says, whoa, we've had enough, we don't need to eat anymore. And then there are some other signals that those short-chain fatty acids do, including improving our insulin response, improving our glucose levels. And so foods that are high in fiber are also low in energy density. So when you're eating foods that are really high in fiber, they're also low in calories. So they're low in energy density. So that means you get to eat a lot. It means you feel full quicker, but you're not consuming as many calories as foods that are not high in fiber. So all things that come to support helping us control our body weight and weight gain. So okay, that's one side of it. Fiber's awesome, has all these great benefits, but then you have to look at, well, how much fiber are we actually consuming on average? Do I have an ability to make a big, tremendous impact? And what is the actual amount of fiber we're supposed to consume? And so when we look at what the average fiber intake is, we're consuming on average around 15 grams. And you're like, okay, how much should we consume? Well, we're only consuming about half of what we should consume. So you can see the intake for non-pregnant women it's based on how many calories you consume. So it's about 28 grams per day is recommended for women, and I always have to look, or 25 for women, and then about 38 is for men. Changes a little bit in recommendations for pregnancy because women are recommended to consume a little bit more calories when they're pregnant and when they're breastfeeding. So it goes up to about 28 and 29. So we know fiber has awesome health benefits and promotes appropriate weight gain or prevents excessive weight gain. And we also know that I have an ability to make a big impact. So if I can increase the diet of the fiber in the diet of these women, then I really might have something. And hopefully I can package it in a way that's simple and easy for women to follow. That's my goal. And I just wanted to show, this of course is not an all-inclusive list, but to look at some foods that are high in fiber and some foods that are not as high in fiber. When we talk to folks about what are some foods that are good to consume, that are good sources of fiber, we use the benchmark of we want to make sure it has 3 grams of fiber per every 100 kcals. And if you find a food there, then it's a good source of fiber. And you start to see a pattern there. I bolded and italicized some of the foods that have higher fiber per kcal. And not surprisingly, we've got brands, sources of grains, we've got fruits, we've got vegetables, and we've got beans and legumes. So those are going to be the foods that are naturally higher in fiber. I mean, look, if you get a cup of broccoli and a cup of cauliflower, 2 of my favorite vegetables, and I can get my kindergarten son to eat them as well. I have convinced him they grow muscles. They don't, but don't tell him. He thinks that they do, and he's all about being strong. And so, I mean, you're looking at getting 40 kcals and almost 3 to 4 grams with just that small amount of kcals consumed. And so that's what we try to focus on. So in addition to foods that you find that are whole foods that are high in fiber, you're going to go into your grocery store and you're going to see lots of foods that will have on the label that they're good sources of fiber. And so these are foods that have been fortified. And it's not that they're bad sources of fiber, it's just that they potentially have a different kind that you would find in your foods. So you'll often see, if you are a label reader, you might see that chicory root fiber is one of the ingredients. That's probably where the fiber is coming from that has been enriched. It's not naturally found in that food. And that's where the high fiber is coming from. And that's inulin, is the fermentable fiber that is in chicory root fiber. Now you have to be careful because some people, and I'm one of those people, can be really sensitive to these foods, and so you kind of have to test it. And it can increase gas and bloating, and your office neighbor next door will not like you. So you have to be a little bit careful with these foods. My son, when I started looking at fiber, again, I have a kindergartner, we're talking about a 5-year-old, I looked at some old advertising, and you guys may remember beans, and that magical fruit, the more you eat, the more you toot. And so I told him that, and he will not stop singing that. He thinks it's awesome. I'm like, well, if that's all I've done. So how do we put this into practice? We did an intervention. We called it the Giraffe Intervention because in our department we like to name studies after animals. And I do know that there is an F missing in giraffe, but when we had the study to name it, we could not come up with what the other F would mean. So we just dropped it. And so I have to read it. Pregnancy intervention revolving around goal-focused education. We were really reaching, but we really wanted to use the giraffe because it's so stinking cute. And so what we did is we called group-based phone counseling because pregnant women love to get in groups and they really enjoy talking to one another about what's going on in their pregnancies. And then we know moms are busy just like everybody else, so we did it over the phone. And so we would have folks call in, and we had a health educator that would lead the group sessions. And so we had one group that was our intervention group, and then a second group who was our control group that just received usual care with their obstetrician that they were seeing in the clinic. So they didn't get any additional intervention. The intervention lasted for 12 weeks. Our goal was to get them to consume more than 30 grams of fiber per day. Because we know most people are not consuming that much fiber, we supplemented their diet with 2 snacks that was comprised of 10 to 12 grams of fiber per day. And we packaged that and gave them to them at their baseline visits. So we got to package 6 weeks of snacks all at once, and they had a huge bag when they left. But most women were really excited because every day they would just pull it out and they had their snacks. They didn't have to do any prep work, so that they liked. We did have to use shelf-stable, of course, snacks, which was a little bit limiting. We would have liked to have used more fresh and whole foods, and so we hope in a bigger study where we figure out how to incorporate that. We gave them a special app, was different than your MyFitnessPal. It only showed them how many fiber grams. So they couldn't see their kcals, they couldn't see their fat grams, and so on and so forth. They only saw fiber grams when they logged in what they were consuming every day. So we gave them the snacks just for the first 6 weeks until we could provide them with the education on how to change their diet and incorporate more fiber into their diet. I won't read through this, but here were some of the topics because I'm sure you'd be like, wow, 12 weeks of a fiber intervention. How much can you talk about fiber? We talked about it a lot. And so one of my favorites was gas station fiber. And so essentially what the premise was if you're out, you have forgotten to pack a snack or you don't have one of our snacks, then how do I make a good choice at the gas station, at the restaurant, or anywhere that you are? But yeah, so they really enjoyed the groups. And so I just have to give credit to our team. We got to spend a whole day packing out snacks, and here were some of the different snacks that we used. Bonitos, I love those chips, and I can get my very picky 3rd grader to eat them. So there were some other things too. Not much else can I get her to eat, but I can get her to eat those. So this is a busy table. So the only thing I want you guys to focus on is that last column that says difference. If you see a minus sign, then my intervention group had less than the control group who got nothing. So the first thing we looked at is over the 12-week period where we had contact with those women, did our intervention, did our fiber group gain less weight? And yes, we did. Fiber group gained 2.1 kilograms less over that 12-week period than women who were just seeing their obstetrician in the clinic. And then we wanted to follow up because what our goal is that we did such an awesome job educating them, got them so hooked on fiber that they continued to consume high fiber and it continued to have an impact on them for the rest of their pregnancy. And we found that, in fact, we did, and that our group gained 4 kilograms less, which is almost 9 pounds. So that's pretty significant. We prevented 9 pounds of weight gain in our population. Yeah, I like it. You're feeling me. Yeah, I was pretty happy. Then you talk about, well, how much did we increase their fiber intake? If you look down at the 6-week line, by mid-intervention, when we were giving them snacks, we increased their fiber intake by 15 grams per day. So I was very pleased with that. Fell off a little after we quit giving them snacks, but still our group maintained more, eating 10 grams per day more. So again, I was very pleased with that. So I think I have taken up all my time, and I want to thank you very much for listening. I have to give credit to the agencies that have funded my research in the past and who continue to, because I love doing this. And then Deb actually gave me a little play from the sarcastic nutritionist, eat your friggin' fiber. And so on that, I will end.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. And so next we're going to have Emily Newbold is going to present to us. And so Emily is a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator at the Cray Diabetes Center at the University of Kansas Health System.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight with you guys. I always like talking about food and ways that we can eat it that's really good for our bodies. So we are talking about whole grains tonight. A part of it will be specifically about fiber, but fiber is just one of the components about whole grains that make them good for us. And it just so happens that September is Whole Grains Month, so what a coincidence. So happy Whole Grains Month. All right, so first, what is a whole grain? A lot of products can say that they are whole grains, but sometimes it's a little bit vague on what that actually means and are they actually telling us the truth. So a whole grain means that the entire seed of the plant is still intact, and that means that it has 3 parts. So those 3 parts are the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. So each of those 3 components contain unique nutrients as well as texture that it adds to the food. And the specific nutrients that each of those have, the bran contains many vitamins, and that's the bulk of the fiber that we get from the grain. The germ has more B vitamins, and then some added proteins and fats. And then the endosperm is where we get that starchy carbohydrate. So here are a few common pictures of grains that we probably see often and consume quite a bit regularly. So we've got, let me get oriented here. Top left, we've got wheat, and then wild rice, and then farro, and then bottom left we have oats, and then bottom right we have quinoa, brown rice, and white rice. So we can't talk about whole grains without also talking about refined grains, because unfortunately that's what we're seeing a ton of in our food supply. And it's cheap and it's quick to make. But refined grains, in opposition to whole grains, means that they're missing at more than one of these essential 3 components of the whole grain. So most often they're missing the bran and the germ. They have the endosperm, so that we have more of that starchy carbohydrate. So often these are recognizable by the terms white, so meaning white flour, white rice, white pasta. So we're missing these components because of the processing that's done to the whole grain, and through that we lose a lot of the nutrients that we get in the bran and the germ. So fortunately, the enrichment process adds back many of these nutrients like thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, iron, and folate. But unfortunately, they can't add back a lot of the nutrients, including vitamins E and B6, vitamin K, magnesium, potassium, and that fiber. We're not adding back that fiber. So a lot of it's missing, even though they do add some of it back. So I thought it'd be interesting to have kind of a side-by-side of what a whole grain looks like nutrient-wise versus a refined grain. And these will vary depending on the grains that you compare, but I chose to compare about a cup of cooked quinoa to a cup of white rice. So you'll see differences, and prominently, there's almost double the amount of protein in quinoa compared to the refined white rice. about 5 times as much as magnesium and calcium, and kind of highlighting to what Dr. Hull had talked about with fiber and the importance and benefits of it, almost 10 times the amount of fiber we've lost just from going from a whole grain to a refined grain. So it's pretty stark whenever you look at the differences nutrient-wise when you go from a refined grain to a whole grain. Now, I won't go into all of these different whole grains, but I thought it'd be nice just to kind of show you the names of different whole grains out there. Some of these you probably recognize, and some of them might look a little different, or maybe you've seen them in the grocery store and not really known what it was. Some of these, a lot of these are now kind of being coined ancient grains, and those are including things like farro, millet, quinoa even, and sorghum and teff. And that basically means that the grain themselves haven't gone through a lot of changes over the years, not a lot of different breeds of them. So that's what the ancient grains kinds of means. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're any healthier than any other of the whole grains. They might have a little bit different of a nutrient profile, but certainly they are much better than the refined grains. All right, so why consume them? The evidence over and over shows multiple benefits of whole grains, including reduction of risk of a lot of chronic health conditions such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and overall death. And a lot of these benefits can really come from that fiber component, but there's also a lot of phytochemicals that are present in the whole grains that give a big benefit to our health. And coming from the diabetes side, I'm a diabetes educator, so we really want to look at things that can help our blood sugar control. What things help smooth things out after we eat, meaning blood sugar, that also brings along insulin, so we don't want wide fluctuations in our blood sugar and insulin levels. And specifically with fiber, when we have that whole grain component, we have that fiber in there that helps to slow down the digestion and helps really smooth out our blood sugar. So that, I think, is a big part of why we see so much benefit in reducing risk of type 2 diabetes. All right, so when do we know when we're actually consuming a whole grain product if it's not an actual grain? What if it's a package and we have to look at the label? So first thing that we can do is check that ingredients list. You don't have to read the whole thing, but just look at that first ingredient and see if it says whole grain wheat or whole grain corn. That means that whatever is at the top of that ingredients list, that's making up the most of whatever is in that product. There's more of this whole grain wheat than anything else in the ingredients list. You can also look to see if there's this whole grain stamp of approval. And you can see there that there's different varieties of those whole grain stamps, just to kind of show you how much of that serving is coming from whole grain. So you can see that one shows that there's 100% of the whole grain in this product, or 50%, or a different proportion of whole grain to the other grains in there. So that's also a sign of whole grains in the product. Good to have nice visuals to associate with good health outcomes in foods. Does anyone know how much, in proportion to your whole grains, how many of them should be coming from whole grains? How much of your total grains should be coming from whole grains? So it's half. So we say at least half of your grains should be coming from whole grains. So how are we doing? This is data from the National Health Examination, the NHANES data. So on the x-axis we have amount of grains consumed, and then we've got age groups across the bottom. So the blue is showing the recommended amounts, and then the yellow dots are our amounts of refined grains. The green diamonds are amounts of whole grains. So ideally, the yellow dots don't exceed the top of the blue bar, and the green diamonds don't fall much under the bottom. So as you can see, for the most part across the age groups, we're consuming more than what's recommended in refined grains and less than what's recommended in whole grains. So how do we bring them back? What are some specific ways that we can bring them back into our eating habits? There's multiple ways that we can do this. And one is just substituting. If you commonly eat white rice or white pasta, maybe just make a 100% switch to another grain like quinoa or a wild rice. Or if you do instant or quick oats in the morning, maybe try to find something that's a little bit less processed than than the quicker the instant oats. So you can try to swap oat groats or steel-cut oats or even old-fashioned oats. If you're consuming breads or pastas on a regular basis, we can go back to that label and see if we can find a whole grain version of whatever product that we're consuming. And a lot of times the catch is the texture. A lot of people just don't like that texture of the whole grain. So if you do want to help yourself transition into more of the whole grain aspect of the food, start by mixing them together. Maybe do brown rice or wild rice with your white rice, or maybe mix your old-fashioned oats with your instant oats, and then just keep going that way so you can kind of mix them together so you have the best of both worlds. And lastly, adding a little bit of extra texture and a little bit extra flavor, you can always top your yogurt or Greek yogurt with some oats or something like that, just to add a little bit extra in there. I think oats are a very good depiction of the various forms of processing that we can have. So it does have a really nice stepwise progression of the least refined to the more refined. So we've got the whole oat groat, which is a lot like a grain of rice. And then next step down after it's cut, we have the steel cut. It gets smashed into old-fashioned oats and then heated a little bit and chopped up some more to quick oats, and then even further into instant oats. So you'll see that as the processing increases, the cooking time decreases. And if it's less processed, the cooking time increases. So you can kind of think of that as what's also going on in our gut. So Dr. Hull had mentioned about the healthy gut bacteria. We want to give our gut bacteria some good healthy foods for them to thrive on. So when we consume a more processed grain, there's not a lot that our bodies have to do to get those nutrients out. And when we think about a really refined grain that has the bran and the fiber stripped away, and most of the carbohydrates are present, there's not a lot that our bodies have to do to get that glucose straight into our blood sugar, so kind of spiking our blood sugar. But on the reverse side, if we have more of a whole grain that our bodies have to do more work to break down the foods, break down the fiber, that allows for more of a gradual release of that sugar into our blood, much more stable blood sugars and energy levels. So I think oats, again, are a really great way to kind of think about that spectrum of what's the least refined to what's more refined, and how can I, where am I at, and how can I kind of move backwards into that less refined food. And I challenge you to think outside the box, specifically think outside the bread box, because I think a lot of times when we think about whole grains, we automatically think about breads and rice and pastas. But a really cool and fun and nutritious way to get more grains in is to think about these grains in their whole actual preserved form. So just a few examples. If you do eat brown rice regularly or white rice, trying black rice, it's got the deeper color means it's got different nutrients and it's got a really nice nutty flavor. One of my favorite ways to eat quinoa is to mix it up with a bunch of different vegetables and make a big quinoa salad. And now as we're entering into the fall season, throwing in grains like barley or something into soups is a great way to just incorporate more of those in. If you do maybe a pasta soup or something, try to throw in a grain in there. And this slide doesn't really need a whole lot of explanation, but I really also encourage you to use these grains as a vehicle to incorporate more vegetables into our diets. I think that we can all agree that we could all benefit from a little bit more vegetables in our diets. And so going back to that quinoa salad, if you need to mix it up with different things, this quinoa salad looked great. It's got tomatoes and maybe some asparagus and cucumber, but really kind of jazz it up, and you can get more bang for your buck if you throw in your grains and then just tag on some extra vegetables in there. And you can also use grains as a vehicle for other powerful nutrient-dense foods like berries and seeds and nuts and spices. So if that means throwing some berries or some seeds into your morning oatmeal, or throwing in some cinnamon and nutmeg into some homemade muesli, there's a lot of ways that you can just throw in other things that tag along very nicely with your whole grains. All right, and that is all I've got for you, so thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Emily and Dr. Hull. I want to now introduce our chef for this evening. So Chef Mary Berg has been teaching at the college since about 2001. Yeah. She is also a graduate of our program. So Chef Berg has a ton of experience. She does a lot of catering, as you can tell by how beautiful her setup is. So we're really excited. She's going to share a couple great recipes with you. So welcome, Chef Berg.
First thing I want to do is just bear with me for a minute, is talk about measurements before we even dive into this. Let me ask, how many ounces are in a cup? Okay, everybody knows. How many ounces are in a pint? Perfect. How many ounces are in a quart? Okay, you guys are rock stars. So a lot of times when we're getting into preparing things, it's, I got to use all this and get everything dirty, and it's a real pain, and da-da-da. So you'll see a lot of chefs do measurements actually with these deli containers because we keep them in commercial kitchens, and they work really well. So any guess on how many ounces is in this? 8, right. And then this one? Yeah, 16, and then this one's a quart. It's 32. So when I'm baking, I don't necessarily use this, but for every day, just kind of memorizing ratios, I use these in commercial kitchens, and then I have things at home that I know that's going to be approximately that much. Or if I'm pinching and seasoning, that's about that much. So I want you to keep that in mind with this, so that I think we tend to cook more when we're not crutching recipes and think we have this huge procedure ahead of us. So just, if you can kind of be mindful of that. Now, it would have been really great if I would have brought a mixing bowl, but I kind of didn't bring one. So maybe Michelle could grab 2 mixing bowls because she's great. But the first thing we're going to do does not require a mixing bowl, which is really, really awesome. This is an overnight oats. Has anybody ever tried that before? Yeah, it works really great. And, if you have kids at home, it's easy for them to do as well. So it's a half a cup of our oats. So we're just going to kind of measure. So about, that. And then depending on what texture you like, if you like it a little bit more, not so runny, you can add more of the milk to it. Or you can leave it a little bit firmer. So we're going to use coconut milk tonight. And the samples that Michelle's going to bring out, thank you so much, that Michelle's going to bring out in a minute are almond milk with vanilla, and then coconut milk as well with fresh fruit. So then, basically what I do when I make these at home is I add chia seed, which is up here. Sorry, let me grab that. And anybody familiar with chia? Super, super high protein, barely can taste the texture. And then, I'm just gonna do this, just kind of measure it like that. So, and then how I do it is it's supposed to be a half a cup, but I just pour it in until it absorbs. And then we'll just use this because it's here. Stir that in. And then I top it off a little bit more. And then the next morning, when it's all soaked in there, I add even a little bit more. So probably need a little bit bigger jar on this one. You could use this size. But voila. And then you can use the old school jars, do plastic wrap on it, whatever works. And then different toppings. And I put some just ideas out here, depending on if you like it a little bit sweeter, if you want something that's super, super healthy, you can even add protein powder to it, like a whey protein. My son does not eat breakfast. He loves this. So it's good for, and he's 18, so it's really good for on the go. And another thing that you can do with this is completely disregard the oats on the recipe and go in and do about just a little bit under 1/4 a cup of the chia seeds and do just a chia with the coconut milk. And it makes almost like a pudding consistency. And then add puree to it. You can buy, even frozen fruit and just put that in there right as you're making it. You don't have to wait till the next morning, and done. So the next thing is going to be a wild rice salad. And I actually cut in some brown rice because the texture sometimes of wild rice can be a bit much if you're not used to it. And I cook it just to the point that it's almost overcooked and blown out. Blown out meaning it's just beyond, it's like mush. So the ratio is, who wants to read the recipe out loud for me? It is 3 to 4 cups. Okay, so we're going to add, we're doing that same ratio basically, just times 3. So we've got our rice and brown rice in here. So basically I just doubled that recipe. And if you can see the consistency of that, it's really, really, I think it makes it really nice. And the color's great. So the recipe that you're going to be tasting is actually a little bit more savory than the one I'm going to make right now. So you've got, I grilled zucchini and eggplant. I did scallion. There's tomato, fresh mozzarella. There's Kalamata olives and fresh basil in that. This one, I wanted to show you how versatile this can be. That's a little bit more kind of fall. You could actually serve that at room temperature. And these are chilled salads, which is great because you can let them hang around for a couple days. They're just going to keep tasting better. This one is a little bit more summery spring. So what I did is did a brunoise of about, we've got about 2 cups of cucumber, and I take the seeds out because it's a little bit nicer to the palate, and people that aren't into eating fresher foods need it to be really nice to the palate. And then also, as far as, do we have someone that's a little picky maybe? And then this is celery, but I see how I do a small dice with that. And you see how this all kind of matches a little bit. And that's not because I'm a control freak. It's because how we teach in culinary school, everything needs to not be a selection. Our palates, our taste buds actually like it. We can taste the flavors more when everything is of similar size. So then I have scallions, and I did the green and the white. So can you tell I got to play with the knife all day today? It was so fun. I loved it. Okay, so we've got that. And then I didn't know how many of you have played with a microplane before. So microplane, a lot of times people think you can't use orange and savory. I love it. So we're going to do a microplane versus, here's the old school way, I say old school, is the zester. And it makes it really thick, and you have to go through and cut it and chop it anyway. So it's, use the microplane. That way it's just one step. You can do it right over your product. And you'll see people do it different ways. I like to do it this way. That way I can actually see as the orange zest is coming off. You want to make sure that you don't hit the pith, which is the white part, because it's really bitter. You don't want anything bitter. You want it to be delicious. So I'll just keep kind of scraping that a little bit. And then you can even cut your orange in half and add the juice, just depending on the level of sugar that you want in this. So we're going to take that and then just kind of hit it in there and then clean that out. And we will go ahead and cut that and add that juice to it. And then I have some white balsamic vinegar and extra virgin olive oil, so we'll dress it with that. Always, always salt and pepper. If you're on a no sodium, low sodium diet, there's different vegetables that naturally taste a little bit more like salty, and celery is actually one of those. Celery root is as well, or celeric. So you can add that, and those are great options to boost that flavor in the event that you do have dietary restrictions. And then the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to pull these off, and I don't know if many of you work with fresh herbs. This dill is actually out of my garden. I have an organic herb garden that is my baby, and don't be afraid of fresh herbs. They're great flavor. You just go through, you don't want to use the stem. This is, as I said, fresh dill. It smells so good. Earlier when Michelle walked by my office, she said, I can smell the herbs. And you just pick this. You pick that right off. It's nice, tender. I shocked it in water earlier, in ice water, and then dried it really well. So there's no varmints on it. And anyway, let me go a little bit quicker here. So then we go through and we will give it just a soft little chop because we don't want to bruise it too much. Yep, stem. And then we'll dress it with our vinegar and olive oil, salt and pepper, and it's done. Now, if you're thinking right now, there's no way I'm ever going to make that because that is way too much work and it's ridiculous. And when I get home at night, everybody's like, oh, you must cook fabulous meals. And I say, sure, it's Stouffer's 1 to Stouffer's 2, come in. So keeping this real, you can go to Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, I mean, even Aldi's, and because they have great organic product. And I mean, you can buy some stuff ready-made. Read the labels. I mean, you all know that. I'm talking to people that know this. So don't let it be an excuse to, not eat healthy. And not have those options. There's ready-cut product, and as long as nothing's been added as a preservative, there's nothing wrong with that if you don't have time. Or you can call me, and I'll come over. So, all right, now we have a salad. Oh, I know what I forgot, or what I want to add. And this is not as creepy as it sounds, but currants. So add currants. And currants and dill and orange are like a dream. Oh, they're magical unicorns. So it's really good. Yeah, I think you'll like it. Red currants, right?
Red or black. Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the recipes, and we look forward to seeing you guys next month.